Welcome, everybody. This is Mike Noack with the Blue Lake Consulting Group. Today, I have Andrea Nelson joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You bet, absolutely. So the Blue Lake Consulting Group is an executive and technical search firm. We kind of pride ourselves on being able to identify and attract high-performance talent for our clients. So the discussion today is going to be about performance, and it's a complex topic. I've always found that people learn best from hearing compelling stories that we're going to be hearing from Andrea. And putting some pieces together so you can kind of demystify what it takes. So when I was able to get Andrea on, I knew that she was somebody that had achieved an elite level of success in her career, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that. So from a performance standpoint, we're going to be talking about sports, and by sports, it's boxing with Andrea. The interesting thing is, and you guys can fact check me on this, so ESPN did a exhaustive study on 60 sports across the globe, the major sports, and rank them against 10 different factors: strength, speed, agility, hand-eye coordination, mental fortitude, etc. And the number one most difficult sport in the world was boxing. So I don't think that'll surprise Andrea at all. So Andrea is a former pro boxer. She is the first female to turn pro in boxing in the history of Wisconsin. So that in and of itself is an amazing feat. After her pro boxing career, she's currently the head coach down at Ford's Gym, where she runs the amateur boxing club down there. And she is also the president of the Bob Lynch Boxing Foundation, of which I'm wearing the club jacket as we speak. I'm a board member with Andrea. So that is a nonprofit here in Madison that supports amateur boxing across the greater part of Madison, as well as the contingent of Wisconsin. And lastly, a couple of years back, the Bob Lynch Boxing Foundation, under Andrea's leadership, was able to get the franchise rights to Wisconsin Golden Gloves. So she also runs that, very busy. So she has many more stories outside of boxing, but that's what we're going to focus on here today. So Andrea, appreciate it. So two questions right off the bat. I want you to just tell everybody a little bit about how you got into boxing. And then what factors you contribute to kind of your high performance level in the sport?
Well, I was not really an athlete in school. I was kind of a delinquent in school, but I was always very active, running around, getting into fights and such. When I was in my early 20s, I got into weightlifting and started really working out hard. I quit smoking and quit drinking and started just taking care of myself. And I got into martial arts basically because I was bored and needed something to do. And I trained like 3-4 hours a day and really moved up the ranks quick in that. Did a lot of competitions, was state champion in forms and weapons and for about 4 years. And then I started getting bored with that. And I heard that Eric Morrell, who at the time, this was in the mid 90s, was the flyweight Olympian for the US. And he was training in Madison, which I live right near Madison. And Bob Lynch was training him. So I went and checked that out and started working under Bob Lynch and got into boxing and was hooked. And so I've been doing that ever since.
No, that's fantastic. So I mean, when you're in there, what did training look like for you when you're a pro? I mean, what did daily, weekly, how much time did you contribute to this?
I would say 6 days a week I was training, and I could tell you more about specifics, and then the 1 day a week that I wasn't training, my rest day, I would usually go for a 20-30 mile bike ride. I would run every day. Usually 3 days a week I do like a 4-mile outdoor run, just doing hills, and then 3 days a week I do sprints at home on the treadmill. I'd spar 3 days a week. Usually Eric Morrell was my sparring partner. I'd drive into Madison and spar and do hand pads and such. And then 2 days a week at home, I do heavy bag work and shadow boxing.
So I mean, that kind of schedule is grueling. And I mean, you have to be ultra committed to something like that to be able to keep up your training. So naturally, I mean, on your way to success, there's always going to be challenges, adversity, failure. And, the best of the best always find a way to overcome the challenges or face the failure and bounce back with resiliency. And I'm sure, you faced plenty of that, on your route to becoming a pro. So, can you think of any specific challenges or failures that you've had to face, and how did you deal with it to come back?
But I've had multiple injuries, as you might expect. Some of them actually took me out of boxing, just from overtraining and such. So I was no longer competitive boxing, but basically it just kind of dug in and kept working. So I guess short answer is you keep moving forward. You have something gets in your way, you can't stop and just mope. You got to just keep moving. I did when I retired from boxing, though, I have to say I was about 3 months pretty depressed because I was so committed to it, all the time. But then I just got into coaching.
Yeah,
So
beautiful. You can always find a different outlet that's gonna help you contribute to the sport. So I'm gonna spring this on you. You told me a story earlier about so confidence, right? Confidence is a fickle thing. You have to have confidence, but not everybody is completely and totally self-assured. You told a story about you had a high level of confidence that you had knockout power, even though you're a very slight build. And then, but you got overconfident, right? And had a sparring partner, that was able to handle you, and that knocked you back a little bit, realizing that, knockout power wasn't something that you could just go out there and count on. Remember that story?
don't.
Okay. All right. That was a bad setup then, because
I
the,
think I
the
told you that story in reference to somebody else. But go ahead.
wasn't it Mount Horeb or something? Okay. Well, anyway, so the point of this.
Oh yeah, I do remember. Okay,
See,
sorry.
all right, I'm not going crazy, right?
So I was training. This was before I really got in strong with Bob. I was still training at my martial arts school. It turned out that my sensei had trained under Bob. He was a kickboxer, and he had trained under Bob for hands. So I was doing some boxing with him before I got with Bob. And there was a woman there that was she was a sheriff's deputy, and worked out with us in the gym. And she was a big woman. She was like 200 pounds. And so we'd be sparring, and I'd throw punches, and I would knock her out all the time, to the point where we couldn't spar much anymore. And I was about to have my first actual real amateur boxing match. It was actually at the Golden Gloves. I went there, and there were no women there for me to fight in my weight class. So I went up a couple weight classes to box this woman. And I was so sure that I could knock her out, and I still think I could. But it's not the same. It's like they're not, she was a boxer, and the woman that I had been sparring with at the studio wasn't. So I was just waiting and waiting, and I lost the fight. I was just waiting for that one big punch instead of boxing. And when you box, you have to make things happen. You can't just stand there or keep moving around waiting for a punch. You got to make things happen. So
Right. So I just found that and that was really interesting to me, because of the fact that you knew you had the skill and you knew you had the power, but to really achieve that level of greatness, it has to be more strategic. You have to think about it. You have to be comfortable and gain the experience to understand that you don't really know what you're going to go up against, until you're doing it, right? So and you didn't let the confidence shake you at that point, realizing, oh, I thought I was at this level. I wasn't able to knock this person out. I actually lost. Maybe I really don't have what it takes. So that's why that story to me was just so important. So
yeah.
appreciate that. So speaking of that a little bit, we've talked about this, but like some people believe that, elite performers have kind of this storm inside of them, right? Or this burning desire to kind of excel and achieve to the top. What can you tell me about you physically, emotionally, spiritually? How do you think about that? Is it an accurate statement to say you kind of have a burning fire to win? And if so, what are some of the things that play out in your head to be able to push yourself that far?
Well, for me, I never really had a burning desire to win. It was more of a burning desire to dominate. I think there is a difference there. But like I said, I was a delinquent as a teen. Had kind of just an emotionally rocky teens and 20s, some traumas in there. And I guess some people would let that kind of bring them down. For me, it made me just want to drive harder to be in control of my environment. And I think to be in control of my environment, I had to be able to be confident that I could take on anything that came at me. And boxing just seems like an ultimate expression of that. Um, so that was my drive. And when I'd get in the ring, it wasn't so much that I wanted to win. It was I was going to dominate whoever was in front of me. And I feel like I did that pretty well.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that. And that's kind of part of the foundation. And so, the Bob Lynch Boxing Foundation, trying to bring people in, from all walks of life. You give them that kind of constructive outlet as their coach. You got the leadership piece. And then, you really kind of give them the skills and the discipline to be able to manage, whether it be trauma in the past or what they want to achieve in the future, doesn't matter. So what do you look for in performance? So when you're at the gym, whether it be somebody brand new to boxing, like Bree that we'll be talking to, or somebody that you're working with, what are the characteristics of that boxer that you're like, this person has the right combination of the it factor to be a top performer? What can you tell us about that?
Well, so like you had said before, boxing is it's a difficult sport, and there's lots of levels to it. So I'm looking for different things, and one is the confidence. I mean, you do have to have at least the willingness to push yourself, even if you don't have the confidence, the willingness to keep trying, because those are kind of connected. I think you can appear confident and actually be pretty insecure, and then some people can appear kind of insecure, but they just are willing to put themselves out there and keep trying. But you get that distinction. So that's one thing I look for is just that willingness to listen and keep trying. And then obviously physical attributes. If you have the wide shoulders and the long arms and the good reach and the athleticism, that's really important. I think you can get by maybe without having all of those if you have the right attitude and drive, but it's a big help. And then being driven. So I think being driven and being confident may be a little bit different. Just having that bulldog drive to keep pushing yourself. You got to be good. You have to train a lot. Like I said, I train six days a week. Several hours a day. You have to be willing to just keep pushing. And I've had boxers that have just like natural born athletic gifts that come in there and they are just superb. They pick it up so fast, but for whatever reason, they don't have the confidence. They don't have the heart to get in there and put themselves out there. Or they just don't have the right attitude. Or I've had people with the right attitude and they just physically have two left feet. So to have somebody that has it all the pieces, like Brianna, who we're going to talk to, she's got all the pieces. She's athletic, she's driven, she's motivated, she's confident. That's what puts it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, very well said. So coming into this sport when you did in the mid, late 90s, this is really important when you think about pushing through, persevering, having the fortitude to go through. You came at a time when boxing was almost entirely a male dominated sport. And given what you've achieved, I don't think it's short to say that you've shattered the ceiling for women in this sport. And so what I want to hear is like, what does that mean to you? And like, how did you have that same perseverance when really all the odds were stacked against you back then?
Well, so I guess to start out, I was an only child. I did a lot of tomboyish things. My dad took me out in the woods and I was raised like a boy. So I was always just doing whatever I wanted to do. There was never a boy girl label put on things. So I grew up with that attitude. when I first got into boxing, there were no women in the gym. I'd sparred all men, and that in itself can be difficult because guys will either have this attitude, it's a lose-lose for them. They'll either feel like they don't want to get beat up by a girl, or so then they come at you hard, or they just like toy with you and just don't even engage. So you don't, it can be hard. Luckily I gained enough respect at the gym that, the guys would box with me just normal, because otherwise I'd hit them. Once we got into competition, the other issue was that there was no women in the competition. So you'd go to fights. I'd go to so many fights. I'd get there, and if there was someone there, sometimes they would just leave because they were scared, or there just wouldn't be any women to show up. So I had to go nationally just to get fights initially. In fact, I turned pro. I did kickboxing, semi-pro kickboxing, just to get ring time, because there were a lot more women in kickboxing.
So how did, what, that's something you had talked about, different regulations, then, how did that?
So right now the rounds are 3-minute rounds for amateurs, for open, like experienced amateurs. The time when I was boxing, it was 3 2-minute rounds. The gloves were a little bit bigger. I feel like the coaches, because it wasn't an Olympic sport, women weren't allowed into the Olympics until 2012 in the boxing. I think coaches were not taking women seriously, and they kind of just humor them and let them pity pat on the gloves and say, oh, that's good enough for a girl. And that pisses me off anyway. But I think if you don't expect something out of somebody, they're not going to strive to achieve it. And for me, the fact that I never had anyone putting a label on what I could and couldn't do, I never knew what the expectation was. So I just drove myself to do the best I could do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because you put artificial handicaps on it, and you see these barriers that you could blow through, but I mean, what you can do for your future. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
since 2012, since the women's boxing was allowed into the Olympics, the level of coaching for women has just excelled tremendously. And now women are boxing 3-minute rounds in the elite level, and gloves are the same, everything's the same, rules are the same, and I think that's huge.
Yep, right. And not to break too much about yourself, for a few years, you trained up somebody that was on the USA boxing for 2020.
Yep.
I mean, that's a proud moment. That's awesome. So, and of course, Bree, we're going to be talking to her next. So lastly, for the audience, everybody wants to achieve something great in their lives. Everybody wants to be an elite performer, whatever that means in their family life, in their career, in sports, athletics, whatever it is. What advice would you give to kind of inspire people to really try to achieve their maximum potential in whatever path they choose?
I don't know that I'm necessarily qualified to give it that advice, but
I disagree, but go ahead.
for me, it's focus on the process, decide what it is you want to do, and focus on the process to get there. I think too often people focus on the end goal, and they can get too discouraged, and it sounds maybe cliche, but you miss the journey. The process is the important part. And it will build up your foundation. It just builds everything right up solid all the way. If you try to just jump to the goal, you miss all that foundational strength.
That's really empowering. I mean, it is a journey, right? And those are the building blocks to your success. And it's so much more manageable to deal with the challenges, the hiccups, the failures, the adversity, if they're small bite-sized pieces that that you can fix and keep moving on. Just similar to an injury, right? I mean, you look at the injury at hand, you figure out how to deal with it, and you move past it. So I love that. That's great. It is a journey. It's a winding path. So thank you for your time, Andrea. I think that was super useful. I'm probably gonna to bug you to have you on again, and we'll change up the topics a little bit because you got so much more to talk about. But this has been great. So thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.
Bye.